guest. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed this morning, Dr. Scott Gottlieb says that there's still a chance to delay the coronavirus epidemic in the United States. Dr. Gottlieb joins us right now. Of course, he's the former FDA commissioner. He's also a CNBC contributor, and he sits on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. And Dr. Gottlieb, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the op-ed that you have out today. You basically point out that people may have to start working from home because while we've only seen about 100 cases, you say there's probably thousands of cases here in the United States.
Yeah,
already.
there's thousands behind that. We now have evidence that there's two different chains of spread, at least two different chains of spread in Washington State.
What do you mean two different places that
originated from. One was a new chain that probably came in from a traveler from Europe. We have 4 cases now in Santa Clara that we don't know how they arose. We can't trace them back to sources in the community. So it does appear that you have outbreaks underway in those 2 regions, perhaps large outbreaks given the number of cases that are presented and the people presenting with very serious illness. So I think we're just days away from mitigation steps in those regions. And it's probably the case that we will have an epidemic here in the U.S., but we can dramatically affect the contours of that, how large it is, how long it lasts, based on the kinds of steps we take right now to mitigate spread.
What has to happen?
Well, they need to start implementing measures to try to engage in social distancing, things like canceling large gatherings, maybe having certain people work from home, closing schools needs to be considered. Other countries have done that.
Closing schools everywhere or just where these outbreaks
Where the outbreaks are occurring, right. You want to target the places where you have uncontrolled spread to try to mitigate it. There's epidemic curves floating around right now among officials, both inside and outside government. And if you implement those mitigation steps very early, you can dramatically alter the contours of the epidemic, how large it gets, how long it lasts. So we're losing valuable time. We need to start thinking about these measures in the regions where there is spread right now.
So if a typical flu virus had hit China and they had done the same things that they did with coronavirus, we can assume that they could not have been this successful with keeping it a lid on this, if we believe those numbers. Is that true?
In terms of being able to mitigate flu, or
what I'm getting at is something key that we said, that it doesn't transmit as easily as flu.
Right.
Because China could not have been so successful in stopping what they did. Flu would be in millions of people in China by now.
I'm not sure that you could draw a conclusion just based on the fact that they were successful at altering the epidemic.
So you think they could stop the flu there?
I think if you take the measures that they took, you can alter the trajectory of flu. We don't do that typically because we have vaccines for the flu, we have treatments for the flu, so we don't do the same thing.
Why shouldn't we be heartened that now the case is out? Would you have believed, and I didn't finish that sentence, but would you have believed that the cases outside of China would have eclipsed the cases inside of China when this all began?
Not this quickly.
It's hard for me to even get my...
And what it shows you is we can't do what China did here, clearly. But what it shows you is those steps, it can be done, right. And that's why I think it's important to be very aggressive early on.
Right.
But people can voluntarily take away a lot of those liberties.
Sure. Scott, when you talk about canceling large gatherings, is that also only in the affected regions? Or for a lot of us in the business world, we are seeing conferences canceled pretty routinely. We're seeing gatherings canceled, dinners canceled. Is that the right steps to be taking right now?
You want to target places where there's actual outbreaks, where you have evidence of spread. The problem is
places like South by Southwest, where you're bringing in people from all over.
Well, they haven't canceled that yet. The problem is that we don't have good surveillance right now, so we don't really know where the pockets of spread are. You saw New York State take much more aggressive actions than Washington State has taken so far, based on just one case in New Rochelle. So I do think that they need to step it up, probably. I think they're going to in the coming days.
State and local officials, you mean?
I have a very practical question. It affects the Sorkin family, but I think it affects families across the country. Schools, just in about 2 and 3 weeks, are going to start to have spring break. And people are planning to travel. Some are. Should they be traveling?
I wouldn't alter travel plans. I don't think, as long as you're not going into a hot zone, as long as you're not traveling to northern Italy or parts of South Korea right now, I think the risk here is probably equal to the risk in other parts of the world right now. And I wouldn't be altering travel plans unless you're in an area that you know is affected. We need to get in place better surveillance. And the big lab companies...
How do we know that people haven't aren't coming from hot spots, been to hot spots?
Why wouldn't you think the West Coast, because of its all the the travelers coming from Asia. The West Coast could be a problem. I heard someone made the case to me that Miami, because of Milan and all the fashion, that there are places that you can logically figure out.
And because we don't have the testing yet, so you're 2 weeks behind.
We're just getting in place of surveillance in New York, so there's going to be cases here.
This New York would be a sort of microcosm.
And Times Square, the worst place. Anyway, go on.
I was just going to say we need to get in place better screening, and one of the things that's going on in Washington today is the big lab companies are having their big conference, ACLA, and the management from those companies, they were going to be meeting at the Department of Health and Human Services. That meeting is now taking place at the White House. I do think they need to step up, companies like LabCorp and Quest that have the capability and really help in a moment of national challenge. They are national assets, and they have the capability to make a difference here.
Do you take what the WHO says as fact? There are some people that say, well, not only that, but
depends on where.
But just in general, do they get more? Are they more alarmist than the CDC? For that, I've seen that said that they get a little bit more hyperbolic in some of the. Do you believe? I don't believe 3.4%.
No, I don't. No, and they're looking at a skewed sample set. I mean, the number is real, but it's a skewed sample set. A lot like our sample set here in the United States is skewed. We have about 100 cases, almost 100 cases, and 9 deaths. It's not going to be a 10% case fatality rate here in the United States. It's going to go down, but we're not identifying the mild and moderate cases.
If we tested everyone right now, you would think, if every person was tested, there are how many more cases would you say?
There's thousands of cases in the U.S.
There's thousands of cases.
But it's a big country. It's 330 million people.
Why won't that spread logarithmically?
It's going to, unless we take mitigation steps, it will.
We don't know the 1,000. We don't even know where they are or who they are. How can we mitigate the spread?
Well, we have to go in and do very aggressive testing in places where we know there's outbreaks, identify those cases, start containing people, canceling large gatherings.
And we haven't started doing that.
Well, Santa Clara made recommendations that people over the age of 50 shouldn't go to large gatherings. I think it's going to get more invasive than that in the coming days. But you're going to start to see this roll out. The hope is that we don't do it too late, where the epidemic curve really starts to, change.
What's a large gathering? Is that a concert? Is that your kid's basketball game? What's a large gathering?
Yeah, so in Italy, they said they capped it at 5,000. They said 5,000 was a large gathering. Probably we would draw that line somewhere else. I mean, anywhere where there's hundreds of people is a large gathering. We have the chance to spread something.
Should we do the show with just the 3 of us from here on out, or do all remotes?
All remotes. We'll do it by FaceTime.
No, 5,000. What's you said? There's a better number. What's the real? Is 500?
Probably less than that. I still think the actual risk to an individual in this country is low because it's a big country. There's probably thousands of cases. But if you're going into one of those regions where the cases have been identified and there's probably a large outbreak going on, the risk is higher.
Scott, yesterday the other thing I saw that concerned me was just warnings about the ingredients to make lots of our drugs.
Right.
We're going to be getting less than we had been getting from India in the past. What will that mean in terms of medical shortages?
Well, some of these were important drugs. India is holding on to what they call the active pharmaceutical ingredient. The ingredient goes into drugs because they're worried about their local needs there. This writing was on a wall for a while. There was articles in the newspapers in India dating back to February 9th that they were considering doing this. So this shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. But this could create shortages here in the United States. These were
what kind of drugs?
Well, some antibiotics, vitamins, hormones, so metronidazole, some critical antibiotics were on that list.
When you look at things, how concerned are you overall? Obviously, this is changing probably not just day by day, but hour by hour as you see good news, bad news.
My concern is going to grow if we are complacent and don't implement very stringent measures up front to try to affect the contours of this epidemic. We have a window. We had a window of opportunity with the testing. We missed that window. We now have a window of opportunity with mitigation steps. We need to seize that opportunity.
I hope people are listening. And Dr. Gottlieb, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot.
It's great to see you.